Plans, we are meeting today. We have an agenda before us. There's no amendments or additions. Can I have someone move the agenda for adoption?
So
Lockwood and Can and Cunningham. Any objections? Seeing none, that carries. You got minutes before you in the package. Are we okay to move receipt of those minutes? Yeah. Seeing no additions, amendments, or concerns about the minutes, those minutes are received, and we have no delegations for this meeting, so that takes us directly into the Regional Parks operation update. It says Jeff here, but I'm assuming someone else is stepping in for that.
Yeah, through the chair, I just hope everyone's going to have a chance just to look through exactly. Really, I guess if there's any questions, what I can say is, it's a little bit of a change from how we had done things the last number of years, in that the maintenance contract that we had in the past was something that we had grounds and maintenance and janitorial. So we kind of changed that up this year, partially due to the cost of doing that together. In the past, I think I've mentioned many times in the past, that was kind of always a bit of a herring for us when that was going to be renewed, when the contract was up. So in this case, we went to janitorial, so we brought that to the commission and then to the board to be signed. So it's a 3-year contract, and they're strictly taking care of, just basically garbage, janitorial, cleaning washrooms, those sort of things. And we were, as staff, going to take over more of the grounds and maintenance work. And so one of the things we did find is that it did take a fair bit of our time, particularly, the rail trail, trying to brush. That's a long corridor, and trying to do it twice a year, as well as a lot of the work that was happening, at each and every park. Other than Bonington, which we actually had a contractor hired because, there's the grass field and the bike park and trails. So that was sort of managed a bit separately. A lot of the things that we might have done that was more project-based and things like that, we had to kind of scale back on this year, as our employees, seasonal staff, were spending a lot of the time doing grounds work throughout the regional district. So one of the things I think that we may do next year is look at, maybe a contract for brushing of the rail trail. We did have some money in there this year to see, if we needed it. And so we did end up contracting a little bit out for some of that work. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the gist of, you'll see within the, within the package, just a lot of the stuff that we did get done. One other thing, just so you know, was we had a dump truck that had gone over James Johnson Park, what I mentioned before, but so that's been with ICBC. So we're making sure that there's no contaminated. They found 3 or 4 spots that some fuel had leaked out. So they will be cleaning that up sometime within the next couple of weeks. And then I'm going to have to go and just kind of look and see how many trees were knocked over and things like that, because that is something else that we'll be asking for to remediate it back to the way that it was.
Yeah, through the chair, how do they clean up the fuel for that? Well, they're going to soak into the...
Yeah, no, they can use it with a vacuum. The mash may spread it out a little bit too much. But yeah, no, so it's done with a vacuum. So they dig down. They found that it wasn't any greater than about 4 centimeters.
Oh.
So really it's just the cleaning up of the site to make sure that everything is cleaned and back to the way it was.
Okay, great. Lockwood?
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Looking at the pictures, they all look fantastic. One picture, well, 2 pictures, I have a question about Cottonwood Regional Park. The outhouses received a fresh coat of paint. Are they not new outhouses?
Those were the outhouses that were donated, but were part of the project with Cottonwood Lake through CASA. So insides, they hadn't really had them painted. It wasn't, it was really, they assembled and put them up, and then we wanted to make sure that they were, completely clean this year, because they get dirty. And usually we have to apply either stain or paint. Because these ones aren't like the ones that we have our standard, which is generally the the cedar ones that we have at other places. We don't have to paint. It's usually just a stain, and the inside we generally don't have to stain. Although we do get graffiti, sometimes things like that, so we have to sand it down and then we restain it. But in these ones, yeah, it was a matter of having to, get a fresh coat on. They're about 3 years old, actually.
Okay. The other one is the next picture. Example, it looks like a leaf blower blowing leaves away from the lake. Please tell me we're not blowing leaves away from a lake in a park. And it, just as example of grounds maintenance work now undertaken by RDCK staff.
I would imagine, if I may, you're clearing the trail that's leading over to the dock that's a little further down versus going around the lake.
Yeah, that's the trail and the beach, and you get a lot of needles that fall and leaves, particularly in the spring. So usually what we do is we go all of our trails, we would clean off with a leaf blower. So Crescent Valley Beach gets covered in needles. And then it actually starts getting back and it creates soil and you start getting grass growing and weeds and everything else. So generally, yeah, we will blow any of our pathways and trails.
And when summer comes, you want to sit by the beach, it's nice if you're sitting on that.
Yeah, we'll do it wherever, like I say, there are trails throughout the regional district, not just yeah.
Okay, I have one more.
Yeah, of course.
Since I'm on a roll.
That's why we're here.
You mentioned brushing of the Great Northern Trail and that there's money in it. So we have a volunteer group that has brushed that trail for quite a few years. This is not new information I'm bringing to the table. They've been waiting to hear from us. And it's free. It's not a grant. It's not taxation of any sort. But here we're talking about money that's going to be having to be put in our budget to brush a trail that we've scared away volunteers. My concern with parks as we continue to go forward is everybody wants parks, but parks are expensive, as this group knows. We've got the most. And I'm wondering, when is it that the regional district is going to start accepting volunteers to help? Because it seems like it appears that it's only, volunteer work is only accepted when we want them, not when they want to come and volunteer.
Yeah, through the chair, one thing is that we just reach out to the ATV club and had mentioned that, that if one, we could start with, helping brushing and get a volunteer, and they kind of declined that they would not be doing the brushing and stuff like that to the extent that we were asking for, right? And that would be, because then if it's a group doing it, right? Like, we don't necessarily have all of the brush saws and the chainsaws and everything else that's needed. And we reached out, and this is through Jeff. So they got reached out and asked and said, yeah, no, like, they don't have the equipment, or they're not going to buy the equipment, or whatever. It doesn't mean that moving forward, like, we are looking at those sort of agreements and how we can do those. Again, it's not always just as easy as saying go out and do it. There's risk, liability, all those things that we have to kind of make sure everybody's covered for. WCB, which we're not quite there yet, just with all of those sort of things. You're right. I mean, volunteers still take time. Like, that is the other thing. It's not just like go do it. It's like it has to be monitored, managed, looked at, meetings, all that stuff. So, volunteers are great, and I would love to have more volunteers, but sometimes it is also work to do that as well, to get all that set up. So in this case, it was something that this year we wanted to try to get, some of our grounds back into the seasonal employees, as that's seemingly what a lot of the stuff that we'll be doing.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I've clearly heard you, that Jeff reached out and they said that they would have to purchase chainsaws and brush saws to be able to do the work. Just because this is obviously being recorded, I don't know by who, I don't know who iPhone is, I just want to make sure
Yeah, that was,
that, okay, because I personally know that they actually have that equipment that they purchased in past. So it's interesting that that information's been brought forward. So thank you. That's all the questions I have.
I think through the chair, just on the volunteer piece.
Yeah.
So to be clear, we are working on it. To be clear too, is that it is not just about groups doing what they want. It is actually, like, we actually have to set up a work plan.
Mm.
We have to follow the work plan. We have to ensure that if they're using power equipment, that they're trained, just as if they're an employee. Exactly as if they're an employee. And then we have to have some level of supervision to the risk of the work that they're doing. So like it has to be similar to watching an employee. That's everything that's required for us to do it as a volunteer. So we are working on it. Just what we need to understand is that at our staffing level, small incidences take up tremendous amount of time. So for example, like it's a stupid thing, but a truck rolling down a bank at James Johnson, then all of a sudden it takes a big chunk of time. But just know we are working on it because we can't manage our parks alone if we want to try to keep costs down. But I know it's frustrating, and sometimes I think it can be frustrating for us because it seems like we're almost there and we just can't push it across the line. But we are working on it. And if there is, Diana, like if there is something that's a miscommunication between our staff and the group that you can broach, please don't hesitate to get in touch with myself or Craig, and we will help with that if we think there's a problem there. Craig, is that fair?
Yes, Joe, that's fair.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you, Joe, for that, because as we will see going on in the agenda, we talk about giving money to a bike club that is not being supervised. And so I, as a director and residents, don't see that equality there. So if it just is a perceived inequality, then that's one thing. But if it's not, because there's people that don't want motorized, there's people that do want motorized, there's people that want just mountain bikes or just hikers or whatever, I just want to make sure that it's an equality for everybody. So that's why I bring it up. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and through the chair, understood. I think, is it okay? Sorry, through the chair.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think, I would characterize the relationship with Nelson Cycling Club a little bit differently in that they actually have a joint tenure of Morning Mountain. So lots of their work is being supervised by us. We do supervision of that work and approval. In fact, this year we had to have a long conversation with Nelson Cycling Club about work that they did without our approval that caused downstream safety issues. So Jeff and Carrie have spent quite a bit of time with them, but they're also answerable in this case at Morning Mountain to Rec Sites and Trails British Columbia, because there's actually like there's a three maybe headed monster there. And that Rec Sites and Trails, we are clearly in control of what is on our property. We then have, both of us have 10 years with, through Rec Sites and Trails for the operation of the piece above. Our tenure is what would you call it, Gary, the senior tenure? Like we're the primary tenure holder? Or the primary tenure holder, and they are what's the formal, do you know what the formal language is?
they just have 10-year overlap.
They just have tenure over it as well. But we're the primary. So the province expects us to manage it in its entirety, but they've given some responsibility to Nelson Cycling Club. So
So
just
the
know that there's a
province-
little, yeah, it'd be
Okay.
through, but remember, when we talked about the trail,
Mhm,
the trail is not the same arm of government.
mhm.
The Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, sorry, not even the Ministry of Transportation, Finance,
ECTF.
CTF, that's.
Which is still.
The actual ownership of it is through a direct management agreement, so the regional district is responsible in its entirety for the trail. So it does make some of the liability concerns a little bit different. It definitely falls more squarely on the regional district. Just so you know, like there's these subtle differences, but they're subtle, but they're actually huge ramifications for the district. And we'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
The additional agenda item.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If I may, a little bit of history. Morning Mountain used to be a ski hill, that you may recall. And with the change in climate, ski hill became less, well, what should we say? You can't ski on dry land. And so what happened is the Morning Mountain effectively closed shortly after the building that was the clubhouse burned. And we had it insured, so the money accrued to the regional district to that service for Morning Mountain Ski Hill. But the service was converted, and it became now the biking thing, because it turned out that although you couldn't ski on the hill, it was great for the kind of recreational biking that people like to do nowadays, which is on mountains and trails and things like that. So the district became, just because we had the service before, we became the primary, and owned the property, we became the primary operator of the biking service through the same manner in which it was taxed and paid for previously. So, however, the biking thing also expanded, and expanded to the biking trails that run up behind the mountain, behind the ski hill, and I think it almost extends all the way over to, I haven't been sure.
They extend over to Blue and Gold on private property, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
And I assume it's all been done legally, and that there is.
No, oh, but it doesn't matter, go ahead.
No, it doesn't matter. The point being, of course, is that we have given the Basic Inspection Club a grant from time to time to help administer those things and do the work. It was under the district's guidance.
Okay, great. Some good history and good to dig out those nuances and differences. I did want to go back to the harmonization of the volunteer application, work plan integration, and just wondering if we're going to be in a substantial place come spring next year with that work. I know it's been on our plate all year, and I'm curious, I know it's being worked on. When do we expect to conclude it so we can?
Yeah, so through the chair, I think the first thing to be concluded is the recreation and park strategy work.
Right.
So that's the first, that's a fundamental piece. When it comes to this particular, very specific item of the Nelson Salmo Trail,
Yeah.
we will be having we're at the beginning of, I think, really understanding what it's going to take. We have a lot of work on the Nelson Salmo Trail to create bylaws and
we can wait for all of that.
Yeah.
I imagine, I know we've had examples in the past of other parks with other volunteer groups that want to participate. So we'll need to make sure that our bureaucratic side is squared away, that when someone does want to contribute to their local park, the local park, we're capable of receiving that and integrating them if they're meeting all the obligations we expect.
Yeah, I think the way that we have to look at this is not about when someone decides that they want to do something. It's about us being strategic about what we want them to do.
Yeah.
There's actually a big difference in that. And that's the part that we're looking at for the strategy to help us out with. Because we just don't have time because usually when volunteers come forward in that manner, they're coming forward with their idea of what the park.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. I appreciate there has to be much like Argenta has that trained fire brigade, there's got to be a sense of how you're professionalizing and creating standardization in the approach of what help we are getting. I appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead,
I
Dennis.
think you got a question to the staff, the chair to the staff. The Great Northern Trail, not the Great Northern Trail, sorry, the Trans-Canada Trail. How are the sections of it maintained?
Carry on.
Well, through the chair, some of them aren't, and others maybe by volunteer groups, sometimes funded by Trans-Canada Trail through grants and things like that. But I know I think it's different all across the country, and certainly across BC, because I do know that some aspects of the trail aren't really taken care of. So yeah, it just really depends.
Right.
Yeah.
Does the district take care of it? Is it in the
Well, the Great Northern Trail is a side part of it, so, we would do that. Warning Mountain and up over the top, Nelson Cycling Club takes care of really all the way to Cottonwood Lake. And now they've diverted, so I don't think any of it's on private land anymore. Most of those trails have all been taken off that and they're all on Crown Tenwood land. And so, they would manage that aspect of it. I know Friends of Cascara Parks and Trails helps maintain the Scatterbo Reach Trail and things like that. So a lot of clubs that we actually fund or provide money to help do that sort of thing as well.
So thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Appreciate it.
Last one?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
just because, Director Cunningham brought up Trans-Canada Trail. With the Great Northern Trail out to Samo until it hits private property, is part of that. How did that become the Trans-Canada Trail? Did the RDCK okay that? How did that happen?
There we go.
You know what, that was a long time ago, and I can't quite remember how that was. I know we were part of discussions in a lot of, when they first came to about the cancer trail, I think it was my first week. And I know that they came in, had a big meeting with us, and they provided us with all kinds of papers and things. And I know there was some aspects that we said we wouldn't be able to manage because we just don't have the capacity. I remember saying that at the time, but I can't remember how that all came about or what was added or, throughout the regional district. Okay.
Good. I think we've dealt with that as much as we can. Any further questions on anything else from this report?
Just through the chair, we did, like as Carrie said, we changed the report quite a bit.
Okay.
How do you, we would like, if you just want to send Carrie, myself, or Craig an email, just to let us know if this report is an improvement over what you've had in the past. So what kinds of things you would like to see, that you would like to see. We may not be able to deliver on it. We'll let you know, but we just want to know, we're trying to create a standard reporting format that makes it more effective and efficient for us, and just want to know if this meets some of your expectations. So by all means, you don't have to. It's not for right now. You can send emails to Craig, Carrie, and I.
Okay.
Because Manager Joe brought it up. Is something that would be really good in the report is, so at the beginning of the year, staff has put in front of us what is expected that's going to happen at the parks. And without having to dig up, is it possible to, and I love the report. It gives me everything when I read through it, the pictures and everything. I can visually imagine, even though I haven't been to some of these parks ever in my life, that I'm wondering if when we get to the end of the season, that there's a checklist. So all parks are going to get, the trails are all going to get blown off.
Yeah,
So
well, you want to reflect the work.
did that happen? And then that way there's some kind of comparison. Are we getting 50% of the work done? Are we getting 100% of the work done? Right now, I can't tell you if we got 10% of the work done or if we got 150% of the work done. So that's my only rebuttal on that report.
Through the chair, we can work on that for sure. And then just sort of in this, one thing that's interesting to note is a lot of the things that we were never planning, right? We certainly weren't planning for sailboats to be, we weren't planning on people, houseboat landing at McDonald's Landing that we're having to deal with, or flooding that kind of happened, or there are stairs that needed to be, like, it's just funny because there's all kinds of things that we can say, hey, this is what our plan is, and then we get diverted because things, happen. So we can kind of do both. We can have, these are the things that we plan to do, these are the things that got done, these are the things that happened that we had no control over, that we had to deal with.
Well, that may roll into the budget for 2025.
Yeah.
Okay, good feedback. I know I'm going to go to Cheryl, see her hand up online.
Thank you. And I like the report. I like the pictures. I would suggest, and I know we can email this, but I don't think all the parks are listed, first of all. So I think that they should be listed even if there is no update, just, for sake of inclusion. And maybe if they were in alphabetical order or something like that, I'm trying to understand the reasoning of why things are in the order that they are. So that would just be, if you're looking to make something standardized, then that might be something to do. And I just want to also say that Sunshine Bay Market was a big success, and thank you to the staff for that. And also the movement of the contractor to the employee model was also very successful. So thank you again to staff for that as well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I saw that highlighted in the report, but the markets have gone really well.
Thanks. I know. Someone, go ahead. Tell us about the houseboat landing. I saw the thing about the sailboat. What happened with the houseboat?
Through the chairs, we tend to, so this houseboat, we think it's the same one. It's been sold a bunch of times, and it was over at Sunshine Bay, and then we had to get it removed from the dock there, and then they were kind of, it was back over at McDonald's Landing, and they said, well, something broke down, they need to do some work, so we gave them whatever it was, 10 days to do it, and then they sold, and then it sounds like it even broke its moorings, and then someone landed at someone else's dock, and they just towed it over to McDonald's Landing, and so these are the things often, like, whether any debris that happens that comes washing up on, whether it's Balfour Beach or Tagging Beach, or often, they're not ours, they've never been ours, but they become our responsibility because we can't just push it back out into the water like other people have done probably when it happens. And there's a cost to that for sure. Like the docks that we had to move from Sunshine Bay, we have offered them to the public at times too, said, these have landed on our shore, someone wants them, wherever, then, and so that has happened a couple times. But yeah, and then the time, trying to find out who the owner is, trying to find out, and then we have bylaw enforcement involved, but you can't ticket someone you don't know who it is and things like that. And, we do have the ability to tow someone, but where do you tow them to? We talked about getting a pin, getting our own pin that we put out and having something there and saying, this will stay at this pin for 6 weeks, a month, whatever it may be, and after that it will be towed, for disposal. But yeah, these are all things that just kind of happen, and sometimes it takes more time than we would.
Okay, good.
Can I do a compliment? I know. But thank you. I appreciate the chair's generosity, but it is only 9:30.
We got more time. Ask the question.
Thank you. You may recall a couple of years ago, maybe 3, 4, there was a question with the drowning and the safety stuff that we put out. What exactly is the end result of all that?
Signage, you're talking signage, right?
The signage and all that stuff, yes.
So through the chair, we put some signage out. We worked with some different groups, but again, we haven't got it isn't our park. But we definitely were part of that. We did an audit. So we know what where the danger is, and we really helped to kind of put some signage out there. So that stuff is there, but again, it's, you know, it is Crown land, it's the responsibility of the province and, you know, but we took the initiative to kind of get this.
I was just wondering if they did step up to the market, that's a really good sign up there. And that's what
I'm pretty sure I've heard from Tom before that signs have gone up.
There's signs there, they,
Yeah, sorry, through the chair, the signs are very good signs that clearly identify the risk. The issue, again, it's not our part, so we help facilitate this work, and it was facilitated from one of our programming staff who did the audit with Royal Life Savings and came up with the wording. The issue for the province is that these things exist, sorry, maybe not this particular type of a thing, but similar risks exist often at the end of right-of-ways and shoreline, and the province is remiss to getting into that business of trying to identify all of the types of hazards for people. So this was very unique piece, and it was good cooperation between Flinro, ourselves, our programming department, and Royal Life Saving of British Columbia. Or sorry, it's not Royal, just Life Saving.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. Because I was thinking about it. I mean, and these signs don't stay up forever. So when they fade or when something happens to them, who's going to take care of them? It's just because it was a life issue, life safety issue.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good. Okay, if there's no further questions on the park update, and thank you for the report, there's some feedback to incorporate going forward. But yeah, an improvement for sure, and I appreciated it. Let's move us on to 7.2, the financial statements. Carrie, is that also you?
yeah, pretty sure, and again, these were always difficult this time of year because, you know, this is an August statement, lots has happened since then. A real big difference here too, like we just got out all of the contribution agreements. So that's a large chunk of money that's not taken out of there this time in the budget. You know, we've done a fair bit of work, you know, since this was produced, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them on the budget.
I can't see anything, so
Yeah,
I can't get on,
yeah,
and I can't get on anymore.
okay.
So,
But
Cheryl has her hand.
Cheryl, go ahead. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah. Thank you. So through the chair to staff, I have a couple of questions. My first one is, I guess I'll start at the top. The first one is we have $185,000 prior year reserve. Like, was there any moving forward, or prior year surplus, not reserve, sorry, prior year surplus. So I was just wondering, like, if there was any particular reason for this 185,000, just for me to make notes about.
Through the chair, well, that's the surplus of unspent money from the year before that is brought forward to 2024. And so if that actually essentially brought down taxation to the level, even though the budget would have been higher, that actually reduces that taxation, I think, to 985.
Yeah, through the chair, though, Carrie, was there any particular project that 185 is funding? I think that's what Cheryl's trying to ask.
Overall, it was funding everything
Taxation.
within the service line.
Okay, thank you. So my second question would be regarding the non-operating expenses. Regarding this debenture principal of $23,065, and this is in the budget as well, that we're anticipating paying $5,000 in interest. Like, that's over 20%. And so I guess I'm wondering, like, if we have this prior year surplus, like, why wouldn't we pay off that debt and not incur this? Well, now on this one, it says we're going to get our total year budget is $6,275 in interest.
Okay, let's get an answer on those.
Yeah,
There
sorry,
first.
we can probably answer that.
So through the,
Couple things.
yeah, so through the chair, if we get to, so that the borrowing there is for, I believe it was a 10-year borrowing for Cottonwood Lake. What we can do, you have a good, if during, we shouldn't do something right now until we get to year end, but during budget deliberations for 2025, if we are carrying surplus forward for projects that are not, like if there's surplus and there's projects maybe that we're not going to do or something like that, we can include that in the budget discussion for 2025. We'll bring back what is the principal amount that we're still owing and what are the advantages of paying that off, and here's the ramifications of doing that. But thank you, Director Graham. That's actually a good thing for us to look at going into the 2025 budget.
So, sorry, just to clarify if I may.
Go ahead, yeah.
So this $6,200 that we're projecting in debenture interest, that's for a different amount and not for just this 20, it would have been for the total loan? Like, I'm just wondering, how are we getting that? Like, that is such a high interest rate. It's just, I don't understand that.
Okay, I'm trying to understand the
Yeah,
principle
sorry.
we're working off of.
Yeah, sorry. So through the chair, the borrowing, I can't even recall now how much that borrowing is right off the top of my head.
It's 250.
So the borrowing was $250,000. So that's what we were borrowing over 10 years. So that's what the interest is based on. It's based on $250,000.
So we're paying 30,000,
We're paying
of which 2,300,000 is going towards the principal, and the other, and the 6,000 is on the interest on the 250.
correct. And so that's what it is. And so the way the ventures work with the regional district is you pay, principal gets paid once a year, interest twice a year. So that's the piece. The interest rate can change. So we will see. I don't know if that budget line is completely up to date. That's completely in finance's hands. But the usual payment period will be this fall. There will be a payment of interest sometime in October, November.
Thank you. I have one more question, if I may. It's not.
Yeah, go ahead, Trout. We'll let, yeah.
I'm
And then
just
we'll go
trying-
hands.
Sorry, I'm just trying to, it's been a while since I looked at this budget, so I'm just trying to remember on the operating expenses, why our 57010 grants is so high at $407,000. I can't remember what that was for, and I looked through my notes and I can't find it, so I just was trying to remember what that.
Cheryl, you're looking at line 57010.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so through the chair, those are your grants to the City of Nelson, to the Village of Salmo, to Weimar Community Association, to Friends of Kokanee Creek, which has the report.
And Nelson Circle.
And Nelson, yeah, sorry, I was just trying to make sure of that grant money that was everything. And then there is the Nelson Cycling Club. So the biggest part of that is $350,000 to the City of Nelson for lakeside playing fields, the waterfront trail, and a portion of operating costs for the main lakeside park.
Thank you.
Just recalling that that's the contribution to have a network of parks throughout the regional district service area. Okay, Hands
Quickly.
Hands got his hands up. It's probably not the first time someone's cracked down.
So I thought I'd mention, no, I mean, through the chair, Joe, with regards to the ventures, and particularly this venture, I think we got the venture because of need for matching funds and stuff like that. Wasn't that included somewhere? But that, aside from that, with the ventures, was this the venture not drawn out when the interest rate was low?
Through the chair,
Renew it now?
boy, does it ever become, it starts When did we finish that? Was it 2018 when we
Yeah.
finished it? Or was it 2019? 2019. So 2019 would have been when it was drawn. So the interest rate would have been low. Usually when we do our budgets, we're looking at what they charged us last, like what.
Well, this is MFA too, isn't it?
Yeah, that's MFA, what it was last year. So what we'll do is like we'll ask finance for an update from them and we'll bring back the details of it for you.
Okay, thank you.
At 6.5, it's pegging in somewhere around 3 or 2.5%. Which is I'm trying to
Yeah.
So we might be better leaving things as they are rather than changing them, if that's for the period. But then again, interest rates are again coming down and we only have half as much to pay back or something. I'd like to find out those kinds of things, but just not seriously, just.
So, Chair, we'll bring it back during budget.
I understand most of it, I just wanted to let them know when they're available.
Going into budget cycle, what might be useful in this kind of template is a section there that's just debt in the service.
Yeah,
Right, like
no,
just
absolutely.
add the principal somewhere as, so there's something to connect it to. And lots of services carry a debt of sorts, and it's always a question I hear at these different tables is, oh, how much do we still owe on that? So I think it probably just needs to live here too. Agreed. It could be an asterisk, it could be a footnote at the bottom, I don't know. However, the finance wants to standardize that. Okay, great discussion. We can, as we always do, try and make this even clearer, get more of the information that we want, and support everybody in making those decisions. So this was done as of August, and we're anticipating a lot more of these expenses to drop in. Like I look at salaries, are we just doing March to August for salaries, or is this like the whole 2024 calendar year? Because at 40% utilization, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, so through the chair, there's more, the work is continued for another 2 months.
Yeah,
And it will continue. And again, there were some areas where, we potentially had salary because we didn't know whether or not we were going to were able to get a contract forward or something. So yeah, there's more that'll be spent, but.
and how are we then since we don't have that information present, how are we tracking against our budget? Are we coming in mostly over, mostly under? Will we have
We'll probably
rollover
be
for next year?
under, just depends on what we can get done. So the early, once again, it was quite wet, but we wanted to do some burning, and that's one of the things that we were still waiting for.
Yeah.
And that was going to be probably about 2 weeks worth of that salary for 2 people. But we're still waiting until that right moment because we still can't do that. Because there's a lot of brush and things like that are Belfort Beach and James John, we have a lot of that. And usually this is the time, sort of late September, that we're able to do that work, and we just haven't yet. So we're keep fingers crossed that we get some rain this week and start.
So we're tracking to be slightly under budget so far. Okay. Just to add to my point, the reserves, like we're gonna have the debts that are owed in the service, just for information, what are the reserves? And people can start to record, and then when you get your FCI scores, your asset management scores, you can put the liability of that beside the reserve. What?
Thank you. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
People see hundreds of thousands of dollars, be like, why don't you just keep my taxation down? Like, because there's $40 million worth of asset renewals in the service. Okay, great. Thanks for that conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to mention on the finance side, Perry?
That's, again, we'll track that a bit better and put it on for you.
Okay. Great work. Then that takes us on to the Pagan Beach parking lot.
Yeah, through the chair, I know this is something that Chair was hoping to hear. So again, with a bit of a different year, that had been, sort of, I don't want to say, it's just been held off a little bit. We actually have a meeting coming up with the engineer. We have some drawings. We just want to get to that kind of right place where we can bring it to the commission on some of the drawings and then what we need to do for the area, because it's again changing the parking at Pagan Beach, which I know we need to do. I mean, it's similar to what we had happen at Crescent Valley Beach, where there's so many people that are parking on the road, and when I mean, for us too, it's the organization of the parking, I think is really important. Because if you ever go to Tag and Beach when, we have, a nice hot summer day, I mean, people are parking everywhere and anywhere, and it gets difficult to even know how many spots are available or not available because there's just, so many people parking everywhere in every nook and cranny. So, we want to do it right. We've had 2 preliminary drawings going through. We have a 3rd one, and we are meeting just to kind of finalize a final draft idea, which will then provide us with a better idea of then a budget on exactly what it is that we would potentially need to do that. Part of that again comes into our First Nations discussions because there is a known archaeological site in the area. So the big thing once we do that is, get the permits necessary to sort of look at that and say what areas do we need to, make sure we're doing something in, we're not doing something in, and then when we do that work, that will be a part of that. So being able to have a proper budget to know once we get that, once we get a proper drawing, and then we'll bring that to the commission for, approval to say, hey, it's just, so
we're doing some planning work.
yeah, so we're still working on it. It just, again, this was a different summer than we've experienced in the past for a lot of different reasons, including, evacuations that we had to manage through our parks and everything else with fire and fire season, which was, obviously with Roseberry and Glacier and things like that, which again, divert our resources, limited resources we have to some other things. So, so it's still on the table. We're still working. If we, by end of October, we have another meeting with SMT Engineering to, go over front drawings.
Okay, can you remind me, I haven't been out there this year, but do you have a transit stop there?
We don't, so I don't know. I don't know if we have,
the proverbial we.
yeah.
Do you have a transit stop there?
No, it's actually a great question. I don't believe so. I believe the bus.
I just don't know if it goes.
So there's parking like Cheryl, maybe Cheryl actually will know better.
I don't think so. I don't think there's a bar, like I've not noticed one when I've ever been there unless there's a newer one. And I do remember Keith suggesting that, and I'm really not sure where the closest stop is. I mean, there would be one within walking distance, but how far, I can't say.
I have to imagine a bus goes by there, but maybe that's something we need to refer over to Dan.
Well, and through the chair, this has been a discussion for a long time about, so there's the park and ride, the Tagum Bridge park and ride, where people park there and, it could be a stop. We have been in discussions with Tech because they do own those 2 pieces of property, of, allowing us a further license that we could actually put a trail that would directly link that, that would directly link the park. So something else, but yeah, transit, I mean, I know we put bike racks in there for people that wanted to ride their bikes, but I don't think there's a transit stop that goes anywhere close to that, goes other than the highway. It goes up the road.
So, through the chair, that would be something that the commission could, ask. Like, we can direct staff to inquire about that. Because the reason for doing that as a commission point is that just shows that there's a political question that when we ask, like Tom, has there ever been consideration for a transit stop?
Yeah, well, I would make that motion that we have staff go look at that, but I would say look at it for all the parks. Right, like this is highlighting one where we're spending money, we're trying to arrange parking, it's, during the summer, it's clearly very full, people are out there drinking. If there's a bus that could be easily just have a stop at the top of that road, doesn't even need to necessarily come in, but, leave that to transit, then maybe we can support a lot of goals together. So if someone would second that, then.
I second it, because I like the idea of all the parks, because I know there are a lot of people who would like to go to Cottonwood, for example, and, but that, if they don't have a vehicle or a bike, it makes it tough, especially younger kids who could go up there in the summertime.
So on the discussion, I like the idea, although we keep saying all parks. We do not own all parks. They're not all in our area, thank God. Are we saying actually all parks, or are we saying parks in our area?
We're talking about,
Now
we're talking about our service area.
No, okay, so that's one thing. Another thing is, when it comes to transit, is that we're not redirecting transit to go to that it must be, and this is maybe direction in that sense, that it must be a transit area that a bus is going past. Because I would be very upset and disappointed if all of a sudden we're sending a bus to a park when there's outside areas that don't have
I
it.
think what we're basically asking is for transit to
Yeah.
look at those locations and see where there's opportunity. Or
Yeah,
like,
I just-
not necessarily trying to say, or bend them to send a bus at an expensive rate where one is not already going.
So, Sarah, as she's listening, she said, yes, there is a stop at the park and ride in Pagum. So the bus currently must, is that correct, Sarah?
Yeah, sorry, I tried to put my hand up, but I don't have that privilege. There's a bus stop on this side, so the Nelson side of Tagum Bridge, going towards Castlegar. There's a bus stop, and then I believe on the way back, so coming back into Nelson, they stop at the park and ride to go at Tagum Bridge. So it's on both sides.
And you're suggesting, Carrie, that there's an opportunity for a shorter connection, because that's a walk and a half. That's not.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah, I'm not sure if it would be a shorter direction, but it would just be a trail that would link, you know, so it wouldn't necessarily have to walk on.
So in this case, we would be asking them to go a little bit further up and come back down. Yeah, but yeah, it wouldn't just be the park ride.
And through the chair, there is a fairly large turnaround just as you start heading up, you know, towards GRM. So there's an opportunity to.
Yeah, it's something that transit still needs to apply its lens to and see whether this even makes sense, but it might make a lot of sense. Okay, any other conversation on that, on just directing staff to explore the parks within our taxation jurisdiction of this commission?
Yeah, and just one last through the chair, it is something that we could talk about with SMT even in the design, right?
Yep.
That there would be enough room for a bus to go in and turn.
That's why it's probably
So
the one
that's
to have a conversation
that
there.
we could look at when we're talking about that transit option.
Okay. Great. Seeing no objections, that motion carries. Then is there, okay, so that's our update on the parking lot. You have a question? Go ahead, Buckwood.
I do, and I apologize because I was, like I said, I left my agenda at home, so I had my notes on there. I did want to have a little conversation under the financial statement at our last board meeting. And I understand how Area E and Area F have had money that contributed to, they wanted it to go to the Nelson Cycling. The thing that I need more clarification for myself is why did it have to go through parks? And the reason I think that it went through parks is because now it becomes part of parks. If something is to happen, now it is part of parks. And if that is the correct assumption, then it should have been a discussion at this table.
Let's leave it at the why and get the answer to the why. Again, so that was the Morning Mountain
Yes.
specific funding that was left behind, and I'm sorry, I'd forgotten.
Community Works.
Community Works. Okay, Joe, Perry, if you want
Oh, through the chair. I know that was my brilliant plan. So it does not mean that Nelson, Samuel, EFG Regional Parks are responsible for the work that they're doing. Most of the work that they're doing in that Community Works application is actually outside of, there's a little bit of connecting work to the top of Morning Mountain, but the rest of it is outside of our tenure. It's their tenure with the province. The reason why it went through is that there was actually no financial plan created for S207, which I may have wrong, which is the old Morning Mountain service. So although the old Morning Mountain service does not have a financial plan, it did have funding in reserves. So and Cheryl, you just, as Tom's not here, you just correct me if I'm wrong, but Cheryl and Tom were considering and did provide some community works funding, but they thought they could reduce the amount of community works funding they did because this, using those reserves for this project fits within the mandate of that old service. So they decided, let's reduce what we did from community works and we will use up that reserve, which is sitting there. So, they use that, but there's no financial plan. So the service that is related is Nelson Samuel EFG. Nelson Samuel EFG has a relationship in the budget to the Nelson Cycling Club. So the transfer, in this case, it's a related work. We already fund Nelson Cycling Club for the money to come into Nelson Samuel EFG, and we grant it out through the grant function that we've already talked to the public that we do from Nelson Samuel EFG. So it's strictly a financial piece. And the big thing, because there was another good question in that, and that was normally you don't interfund one service to another. In this case, Morning Mountain, so for example, Morning Mountain itself, even the regional park has received funding from that reserve. And that's because the two purposes of those services overlap, in particular at Morning Mountain, because the way that reserve was accumulated is that was the insurance payout for the lodge that burned down, which I broke my foot in as a young worker. Lodge that burned down. So I broke my foot and the thing burned down the next year. So it was all in vain. But that's why that reserve is there. And that's why in particular, when it comes to Morning Mountain, there were those two overlapping services. Now that no longer exists. So that is the reason why.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation, and it's too bad that explanation didn't happen at the board, because there's been a lot of conversation now around. So if you could have done it for this service, why can't you do it for this? It can be a different park, but there's no actual service that we can just create, and just those people pay for that and put it in. So it's a good explanation. I'm just disappointed it didn't happen here before it went there, but that's fine. Thank you.
No, and through the chair, it's like the one thing that's really interesting with regional parks is that you can actually create overlapping regional park service. So in this case, you can almost think of that Morning Mountain service was an overlapping, or Nelson Samuel EFG overlapped that service. So you can do that. And in fact, in the Creston Valley, we're actually looking at that possibility of a Creston ABC going back to the original service. There would still exist an Area A service. So we're actually looking at those mechanisms right now to fund parks parks differently. In particular, there's historical pieces that exist.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Adam. If I may, yes, when the lodge burned, we had quite the fight with the insurance company who didn't want to pay us unless we rebuilt it. But seeing as how there was no point in having a lodge there when there was no ski hill anymore at the time, they finally acquiesced and gave us the money. But it did take a lot of fighting to make it happen.
Thank you.
What happens with S207 now?
S207, so at some point in time, there'll be a discussion with Cheryl and Tom about do they want to repeal the establishment bylaw for S207. So there's no commission bylaw, there's just an establishment bylaw that allows taxation. But they may want to keep that, like they, for example, if development of a public boat launch on the lower part in the Tagum area, that might be a reason why they want to keep that service, but keep it dormant until they have something like that.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for
then,
entertaining me.
yeah, it was S207. Let's take us on then, if we've touched on that, to the correspondence on the Kokanee Creek Nature Center activity report. Do you have a detailed report from their activities of this year? Is there any comments or questions or business arising from this correspondence that anybody wants to flag? Well, yeah, I asked, so.
You did. I really would like, after seeing where everybody is coming from, I would really like us to put this to the entire board.
The Kokanee, you want to refer the whole report or?
No, ask the entire board, all directors, to be paying into. This is a place that benefits the regional district as a whole. This is not something that benefits 5 areas.
Okay.
When you look at,
How are you suggesting we do that?
I'm not sure, staff. Because not everybody has parks. I get maybe Area K doesn't want to do that, but I see people came from Vernon. Did they come through Area K? Did they camp a night in Area K? And then they came down and that was their next place.
I hear you.
So, I realize Area K is the farthest away. I realize Area D is the farthest away, but we all benefit because of this park.
Okay, thank you. Hans?
Yeah, thank you, I understand. This is a matter of philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Because the question is, we all benefit, or I benefit if I go to the coast and use parks down there. They benefit when they come and use parks up here. And then when they do use parks up here that are close to Nelson, they all, many people who work in Nelson and shop in Nelson and sell stuff in Nelson also benefit financially from the operation of that park. And the closer they are to the park, the more likely the businesses in the area are likely to benefit. So it could be thought that since the areas closest to the park benefit financially, maybe the areas closest to the park should be the ones who pay the taxes. So there is 2 philosophies here. And I think when it comes to questioning with the board, that you will find that most of the boards like to say, well, listen, I've got a park in my area to benefit my area. Sure, the tourists come in, I don't charge them for it, or if I charge them extra, but whatever, the thing is, it is a benefit to the area as well. And I know that, for example, I've had nieces and nephews who have come up and they've been camping and they camped out there for a couple of days and the kids loved the programs. And so they stayed a couple of days extra because of the park program the park was putting on that a lot of parks don't put on. And as a result, they spent probably $500 or $600 extra in Nelson on food and entertainment and all the knickknacks and geek dogs and little signs and all the crap that you can buy. Local advertising. That's not crap. You understand what I'm saying.
Stay in an Airbnb, displace someone from a housing situation.
Stop it.
They bought their own motor home.
Why? It's also things that happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we have to look at this, and I would really like it if everybody would pay towards this park, but I can see that there's a good reason for not.
So there's 2 questions here, and we had touched this earlier in the spring of petitioning the province around its interpretive center education programming that had dried up and identifying that as a need we saw within our parks. There's a conversation there as a broader organization of across all parks of how or where do we want to do or support interpretive programming. Potentially, I could see this conversation piece can attempt to be some sort of leverage to have a larger parks conversation of do we just have one park service and have some uniformity into it. But it also is an example of where that kind of work would make some sort of sense. So whether we want to have that conversation first or not is, I think, part of what we're trying to have a conversation about. Like, that is going to take, I think we've got to sit down probably with our other directors inside our parks and just have somewhat of a workshop or a conversation around governance. Is that only going to come into all rec, or is that, okay? So are you nodding to say that the conversation from all rec around governance might lead us to an all parks conversation?
I'm saying through the chair, and I think
With your nod? There's nodding over here.
I think it's been batted around, it's been attempted a number of times. Again, your regional parks and trails strategy document.
Yeah.
That will help lead that conversation. So I think we should wait to receive that report and then have a thorough discussion about which priorities you want us to work on first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cheryl?
Thank you. Just looking for clarification here, because I know this is a provincial park and not a regional district park. I'm just looking for clarification that this interpretive center is being funded out of the 57010 grants that I questioned earlier from the Friends
The
of
answer is yes.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, when that funding dried up, as far as I understand the history, that's when the regional district stepped in to fill the gap. Instead of seeing it close. Go ahead, Cheryl.
supplemental one question through the chair also for clarification, as if somebody's still new here, is that if we were to make a change or to request other regions or residents of the regional district were to participate in this service, this would require assent voting, correct?
Through the chair, that's complicated. If you were so regional park services do not need assent voting. So the board could create RDCK-wide every single area municipality service, just with the board agreeing to do so, and then the province agreeing to do so. So it's regional park services do not require assent voting. What makes it is that there's existing funding that most areas have, that's whether that be grant and aid funding or whether that be community development funding, all of that kind of funding would be the Kokanee Visitor Center would be eligible for. So there's many different ways that funding could be sourced. At the time when we looked more broadly at what were regional park services in the regional district, including looking at like the city of Nelson and village of Salmo, and then this was one that was identified as having high community value and meeting the threshold for continued funding.
Oops.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, so supplemental then. So there would be really no reason that if other areas wanted to contribute to this part or this interpretive center through their grants program, that could be done by the proponent just asking them?
And it getting approved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Lockwood?
The one reason, thank you, Chair, the one reason I did bring it up for this is because under the acknowledgement, it says the regional district of Central Kootenay, which 100% we are all one, but we are 5 out of 20 that pay for that. There is no acknowledgement in the entire report, and somebody actually brought it up to me. I'm like, I don't know, I didn't read the report that close. That it is 5 areas that actually support this. And so is it something that the proponent needs to be aware, because I know when they came as a delegation,
Yeah,
they were not aware.
we had if I may,
Yes.
we had a conversation about signage projects similar to this last spring around making sure, I think as some of the parks went in, that the sign outside actually says, you know,
Area I,
E,
area.
F, Nelson and Salmo and G. Yeah, not to put it last, but just so everyone sees it. But like that's something we are now doing, or we are doing in some places. Because I know I've seen a mock-up of a design of a RDCK sign that actually lists out the areas as opposed to just regional district.
Yeah, through the chair, so they would be on our regulation signage, not on our
Welcome to
park signage, yeah, it would be on our regulation signage, which would be in the park saying these are the things you can, but it doesn't say it on our signs coming into the park. It just basically it would have what park it is. It would basically have our RDCK logo, but also have just our branding.
Okay. I think it's an interesting topic. I personally don't want to send staff or the proponent off to update any of that. Because I just think it's good to, I think it's good to know, but I don't want to create that work either. Because it is the RDCK, like the RDCK as a whole. So we have all these fractures. The logo is
All the services are separate, all 200 of them.
yeah.
As we feel that we're a whole, we are different communities, and we don't, you can make us a whole as much as you want. But as an individual person that's paying taxes, they want to know that they're being recognized for the money that's come out of their pocket to pay these things.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that for myself.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's what people say. And right now is lots of that conversation because of elections here in Canada or BC
Yeah.
and the States.
That's fair. So it's a good flag, and we have that, you know, as a conversation about what we do in parks long term. We'll have a strategy coming forward and a report to go with it. We'll be having governance conversations at REC, which will find ways to move values back. We'll get clarity from the board as we go.
Thank you, Jared. Last word, of course, as there's an election coming up, this would be the time to talk to our MLAs and the various parties to see how much they'd be willing to fund that kind of service, because it does help everybody in the province rather than just people locally.
There's a piece there, maybe potentially, there's a piece around advocacy, I think, after the election is complete. And maybe that's something we can go and the chair can go bother the MLAs. Because I think it's a great suggestion, but the timing being.
Oh, I understand.
If we could have thought of that 2 months ago and had the debates weighed in on.
I've always thought of that, and this is my time of year when I really bother MLAs and prospective MLAs.
Yeah.
Try and get their opinions in. Because then I can come back and say, you said you were going to do something about watersheds. You said, this is the time to nail them. And
There's a debate tonight, so you guys can just stick around tonight.
Where is it again?
It's at the Prestige.
Is it
At 7.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's move us on from this one. That takes us to public time. So, right now at 10:15, Observer and iPhone, just recognizing the members of the public who are here. Do either of you guys have a question for commission before we proceed to our in-camera section? See if anyone's looking for their mute. Okay. Hearing none, no questions from the public. That's why it's really valuable for people to, when they can, tune in to our Zoom meeting directly. And it's great to watch them on YouTube, but when you're in the meeting, you can ask a question. Let's move us on to the in-camera preamble. So it is in the opinion of the board and in accordance with section 90 of the community charter, the public interest so requires that persons other than directors, alternate directors, and delegations and staff be excluded from the meeting. And further, in accordance with section 90 of the community charter, the meeting is to be closed on the basis identified in the following subsections. A part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one of more of the following: the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And I will just give us a couple minutes to clean up our Zoom chat. Observer, iPhone, if you can help us, you can drop off now.
Oh, there is a hand up.
No, it's
Who's that? Oh, that's true.